Raiders of the Lost Ark, Citizen Kane, Pulp Fiction, Harry Potter, Harry Potter again, Harry Potter again, Harry Potter again, Star Wars, definitely, and probably one of the most famous, maybe only second to Citizen Kane, Lord of the Rings, and I can't leave off one of my absolute favorites, The Fifth Element. The biggest thing that all of these stories have in common is their use of a tried and true storytelling element, the easiest storytelling tool in our Dungeon Master and Game Master tool belt, the MacGuffin. So what I want to talk about today is not just how we can, but also how we should utilize this particular tool to help us build out a fun and exciting Dungeons and Dragons campaign for our players. So I hope you guys are ready. Let's get started. Welcome, adventurers. What's going on, guys? My name is Cody, and this is Taking 20, a channel about all things role-playing games, and today we are looking at the MacGuffin. So let's start off by looking at what a MacGuffin actually is. By all accounts, it's a term originally coined by Alfred Hitchcock for a specific plot device in the form of some goal, desired object, or other motivator that the protagonist pursues, often with little or no narrative explanation. At least that's what Wikipedia says. But in essence, it's just a thing that drives the story and creates conflict. Although, to be totally fair, it doesn't actually have to be a thing per se, but it can even be a person or a simple goal, as mentioned previously. And this thing is not really what your story is about, though the story is certainly tied deeply to the thing. Confused yet? Okay, so let's look at a few examples from the movies I mentioned earlier. Let's start off with an easy one. R2-D2 and the Death Star blueprints. This is a classic example of a MacGuffin. When A New Hope starts out, we see Darth Vader hunting for the MacGuffin. He tracks down Leia's ship and takes her captive while the droids end up on Tatooine, which in turn, of course, is the catalyst for Luke connecting with Obi-Wan and poor Uncle Owen's death. But to say that Star Wars A New Hope is about hiding R2-D2 from the Empire on Tatooine would be a little bit silly, even though that is actually a significant portion of the plot of the film. So it matters to the characters, but it doesn't really matter to the audience. In fact, the risk of R2-D2 being captured by the Empire probably doesn't evoke any real emotion from the audience when watching the film, as by that point we are far more worried about how Luke is going to escape Tatooine without being tracked down by the Empire. So, a prime example of a MacGuffin. Now let's take a look at Rowling and the Harry Potter series. This storytelling tool is just about abused by Rowling. It's basically her go-to. First off, we have the Sorcerer's Stone. Absolutely 100% MacGuffin, right? It's practically never seen by any of the characters, but by the end of the first film or the first book, it's the driving catalyst for the entire story. Then, of course, we have Tom Riddle's diary. Then you have Harry Potter actually becoming a MacGuffin in the fourth book. Literally, the entire plot of the whole year is how the Death Eaters can get Harry alone in the cemetery. Though we can see that this is kind of a stretch, as typically the MacGuffin isn't really the protagonist. But if we turn the story on its face and look at it through Dumbledore's eyes, Harry easily fits the description of a MacGuffin. Then there's the prophecy and the Horcrux, and of course the Deathly Hallows themselves, which in a clever twist with the Horcrux, you realize they really haven't been seen throughout the entire series, but they're actually incredibly important to the overall story, and most importantly, important to the characters. By now, we should have a better understanding of what a MacGuffin actually is. So let's talk a little bit about how we can use it as Dungeon Masters and Game Masters in our campaigns. First, I want to give a huge shout out to my sponsor for this video, Elderwood Academy. Elderwood Academy makes some of the most stunning gaming accessories that you can find. Seriously, this stuff is so cool. And if you haven't seen it before, you've got to see it for yourself. And the best part is that everything they make can be completely customized. from their ridiculously awesome Codex dice towers to their spell books, which again can be customized even with the internals of it exactly the way you want it to their wildly popular hex chests and mini hex chests, which by the way just finished a huge Kickstarter. So everything they make just for you with a quality that will last you for decades. So I'm going to put a link down in the description below where you guys can go and check out what they have for yourself. Okay, so the first bit of advice I have for implementing a MacGuffin in your game is to make it the key to winning. That's to say that in a lot of D&D games, the objective is, hey, there's a bad guy doing bad things to good people, go stop them. And usually this ends with a showdown of combat, right? Now, that's not to say that that's a bad thing by any means, but sometimes that can leave players with a sense of sort of pelts on the wall. But what we want to do is to make our MacGuffin the key to winning, right? That's to say that just going directly after the big bad evil guy and trying to stab him with the pointy end of a sword is not what our players should be doing. Hell, we can set up our campaign that might not even be a possibility anyways. Maybe the main villain is just too powerful, like Strahd for instance. Or maybe the villain is hidden away safely while they command their small army of cultists from afar. Or maybe our villain is immortal, and the only way to stop them is to gather the 7 Dragon Balls in hopes of making them mortal again. But whatever route you ultimately go, the key here is that the bad guy dying shouldn't have an impact on the story as far as the MacGuffin goes. And that we should keep waving our shiny MacGuffin in our players' faces like a carrot on a stick until they actually go after it. Even if our villain is stopped, it doesn't mean their plans have to. It took the Hulk, right, all of, 3 seconds to defeat Loki, but closing the portal opened by the Tesseract was really the main story driving element at the end of the Avengers. The second piece of advice I have is to just give your players the MacGuffin. Seriously, just give it to them. It's hysterical, especially if they don't realize that they have it, a la Frodo Baggins. Now the story is not about killing the bad guy, but rather keeping the MacGuffin away from them. This can open up some very unique experiences with the types of storytelling elements that you have to work with, and can help you move away from, stale quest givers of, hey, I have this problem, can you please go swing your sword at it for 500 gold pieces? The third tip I have for you is to make your MacGuffin personal. The MacGuffin doesn't always have to be an earth-shattering, end of the world as we know it ring of power, right? Sometimes the MacGuffin can be something just very personal, like a loved one or an item of significant personal value. Now, there is a subtle difference here between a standard villain kidnapping a PC sibling to force them to do something versus a true MacGuffin. Taking Pirates of the Caribbean as an example, Elizabeth Swann is actually a MacGuffin. So the key here is that all 3 parties placed a high value on her, right? The pirates wanted to break their curse, but both Will Turner and her father wanted her back because she's personally valuable to them. Another masterful example was from Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice during the first Provoker series with the Box of Dirt. While Matt didn't really use this as a true MacGuffin because the villain wasn't really interested in it, it was close enough to include because the item was sought after as a catalyst for the adventure, and ultimately the only value it held was that of the burned down town and what it really symbolized and meant to them really as a community. So find a way to make your MacGuffins personal to your players, but try to be sure to give your villain a reason that they want it as well. Another great way to use a MacGuffin is to make it a goal and treat it as an obstacle. Let's take the pod racing in Star Wars as an example, right? You have these characters that for a good chunk of the film get caught up in the MacGuffin of trying to win the pod race. That goal is a MacGuffin. It's ultimately unimportant to the overall story, but for the characters, it's very, very important. Having your players try to find a creative way to win the favor of a king, to allow them to pass through a forbidden area, could lead your story in a really fun direction. Or perhaps they find themselves on an island, and the only way off is to win a transport through a Hunger Games style tournament ran every year by the locals. Now you've added in a MacGuffin in the middle of a campaign and given your players something of importance to them to continue the story that is really a catalyst for a series of events in and of itself. For my fifth tip, don't forget that people can be a MacGuffin too. Maybe your players must track down the long-lost son of the king and true heir to the throne, all the while you have a villain hunting for them as well. Probably one of the best examples of a person as a MacGuffin is Saving Private Ryan. As long as you remember to make this person important to your players and any antagonists you have, you can really mix up the flow of a normal campaign. And if you're still not sure how to do this, Wizards of the Coast use this tool exactly to great effect in Storm King's Thunder with King Hecaton, who was certainly a MacGuffin. And finally, the last tip I have for you is an easy one. Don't be afraid of the crazy, powerful, magical artifact. Sometimes just going with a simple Ring of Power fits the rule of cool with this particular plot device. And don't worry if it's a little tropey. It doesn't mean it won't still be really awesome for your players. So now it's time to pass it over to you guys in the community. Do you guys use MacGuffins in your games often? Is it by design or just happenstance? What are some of the cool ways that you've seen a MacGuffin use, whether it was actually in your D&D game or maybe even in one of your favorite movies? I want to give a huge shout out to all of the kick-ass adventurers over at welcomeadventures.com. Don't forget, guys, we are in the final stages of our new Dungeons & Dragons 5e class, the Mistwalker, which is currently in a patron beta. So if you are an adventurer over there, regardless of level, please remember to go download the entire class and give us some of your feedback for the final version. If this is your first time here and you love role-playing games as much as I do, I'd love to have you subscribe. Every week I put out new videos on GM tips, player tips, tutorials, and more. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, just hit that subscribe button down below and come join us. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Cody, and may your games be filled with awesome memories and even better friends. I'll catch you guys next time.
Yeah.